Girl, stand up. Why is that man always stealing your car? Hey y'all, welcome and/or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, y'all. So I did my nails this morning, actually. Can y'all see that? Can y'all see the different colors? Okay, there we go. I think it's cute. I think it's cute, but I was going for a more vibrant fall look. I feel like I should have done burgundies and stuff, but yeah, that's not what I got. I got more of a gobble gobble turkey look, and it's not ugly, but the color palette just isn't what I was hoping for. And I really don't know why I thought I was gonna get vibrancy out of these colors, but yeah, that's what I thought, and I was wrong. So yeah, I might try it again with some different fall colors, like some greens, some brighter oranges, some burgundies, because this is giving turkey and I don't like that. But nonetheless, the nails are done. What they say, you live and you learn. I'm learning. But anyway, since the last conversation that me and you had, I have officially broke the 6,000 subscriber threshold here on YouTube. So shout out to y'all. Hello to all of my new subscribers. 10K on the way. Say it with me, baby. 10K on the way. That's the new motto for the channel. Because we are thriving and surviving over here. We is on our way up, and I love that. But yeah, with all that out the way, we're going to go ahead and hop into today's case. And if you've been rocking with me for a little minute now, then you already know that we're going from the low lives to the rich wives of America in alphabetical order. So from Alabama to Wyoming, and today we are in Rhode Island. And today I'm gonna need y'all to keep up with me because this case has a lot of people in it and it got a lot going on. All right, y'all, so we in Woonsocket, Rhode Island on July 30th, 1991. It's roughly 6 o'clock in the morning, and the manager at a Burger King goes into his store to get ready for the day. And once he gets inside, this is when he finds two of his employees, 21-year-old cashier Tammy Petrin and the overnight janitor Jenner Valeda. And they both on the floor lying in pools of blood. And as soon as he sees this, he calls the police. And once the police get there, it's clear to them that both of these employees have been shot. And it's evident to them that Jenner is deceased. However, Tammy is still fighting for her life. She's still breathing. And so Tammy is rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, though, she does pass away from her injuries a short time later. And right off the bat, investigators said that this didn't look like a robbery because the safe wasn't touched, no money was missing from the store, and all of their personal, Jenner and Tammy's personal affects, they were still on them. There was nothing that was taken. And so this seemed like something targeted and intentional. And so after delivering the news of their passings to their families, they wanted to talk to Jenner and Tammy's families to see if maybe they knew anybody who might want to hurt either one of them. And Jenner's family said that they couldn't think of nobody who would want to hurt him. He was the most fun-loving, kind-hearted, lovable type of person who just didn't have an enemy in the world. Tammy's family, on the other hand, they said that they knew somebody that would want to hurt Tammy. And that was her estranged husband, Ronald. And once they heard this, they was thinking what me and you both thinking. This is the obvious suspect. And so they go to look into Ronald, but they find that Ronald could not have committed this crime because homeboy was in jail. And y'all just will not believe the reason why he was in jail. But we gonna talk about that later. We gonna circle back. But for now, let's just continue with the investigation into Jenner and Tammy's deaths. So now that Ronald is alibiing out the way, the investigators put feet to pavement and they start talking to the locals around Burger King. And they run into this one lady named Julie. And Julie said that she was walking home early that morning. It was roughly around 5:30. And she said that she seen a blue Ford Escort ride around the block like 2 or 3 times before it pulled into the Burger King parking lot. And she said that if she ever saw this car again, she would be able to identify it. And so they was like, oh, okay, cool, bet Julie will be in touch, right? Okay. So they put an APB out, and all points bulletin basically be on the lookout for this blue Ford Escort. And for a couple of days, it was kind of radio silent. They ain't hear nothing back about this blue car. They didn't find it or nothing like that. However, a couple of days later, a woman called into the police department to report her car unstolen, basically. She had said that earlier in the week, she called to report her car stolen. However, she found out that her son had the car the whole time, and so now she needed to report it unstolen. And she didn't want to press charges on her son or nothing. So you know, just, I got my car back. It's cool. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Just give me a description of the car so that we can put it in the system. And she tells them that it's a blue Ford Escort, describes it, yada, yada, yada. And they like, this car is sounding awfully familiar. This sounds exactly like the car that we got an APB out on. And so they're like, oh, okay, well, you said your son had it. What's your son's name? And she was like, Gary Maxey. And as soon as they heard that her son's name was Gary Maxey, they was pretty much just like, oh shit, here we go. Because Gary Maxey was well known to the police. He stayed in and out of trouble. It was never nothing violent though. A drug charge here, a forced check there, you know, nothing too crazy. But being that he was a career criminal, they didn't put it past him to be into some shit, like maybe escalating behavior, maybe. So with this new information about Gary Maxey being in possession of a blue Ford Escort that matches their APB description, they get a warrant to go to his mama's house and arrest him on unrelated charges and to tow the car. And so that's what they do. They arrest Gary and they tow his mama's car. And they take it to the police lot. And once they get it there, they call Julie back like, hey, Julie, could you come down to the lot to see if you can identify this car, yada, yada, yada. So she in the lot, and she spots this blue Ford Escort. And she points it out. And she said, this is the car that I seen. I noticed the car that I seen. However, she did not get the license plate number. And so without that, it couldn't be like a definitive, this is the car that she's seen. But being that she pointed it out, they was kind of like, yeah, this is the car. So now that Julie had identified this car, they asked her, would she be able to describe the person who was driving it? And they wanted to see if the person that she described would be Gary. And she was like, oh yeah, I remember what he looked like. And so she starts describing this person. And as she's describing them, the investigators are like, that don't sound like Gary. But nonetheless, they still want to talk to Gary anyways. And so they get Gary into an interrogation room. Because at this point, literally everything that Julie said is pointing in the direction of Gary besides the description. But as soon as they get Gary into the interrogation room, he said he don't know what they're talking about. He wasn't arrested on no murder charge, and they don't have the okay from his lawyer to be questioning him about no murder. So yeah, no, he wasn't talking. He said he didn't say anything. And they pretty much had to let him go on that, but they did send him back to jail to sit on his other charges. And so now the case is at a standstill, but only for another couple of days though, because a couple of days after they talked to Gary, the investigators got a phone call from Tammy's downstairs neighbor. And she said that a couple of weeks before the murder, she saw somebody out on Tammy's fire escape peeping into her window. And when she saw the person saw her and he ran. And she was like, oh, hell no, that's hella suspicious. And so what this downstairs neighbor did was she watched this person hop into a gray car and drive off. And because she felt that it was so suspicious that he was peeping into Tammy's window, she ended up getting the license plates. And the license plates was HI-53. And she even did one better for the investigators because she said that she had recognized the person who was peeping in on Tammy. And she said that this was a man that she went to junior high school with, and his name was Stephen Wilson. And Stephen Wilson was also not a stranger to the police. He too was a nonviolent offender, but a criminal nonetheless. And so now, of course, they want to go talk to Stephen because why is you out here peeping in Tammy's window right before she get killed? Like, sir. And they really didn't have to go too far to look for Stephen because he had recently been picked up for outstanding warrants on drug charges. So he was sitting in the county jail. And so they literally just had to go to the jail and pick him up. And once he got into the interrogation room, to make a long story short, he wasn't talking. And so they sent him back to his cell and continued on with the investigation. And so since they had the license plates of the car that Stephen allegedly drove away in, they decided to run the plates. And the plates came back to a girl. And this girl was Gary Maxey's girlfriend. Remember Gary Maxey, their first suspect, the one who mama's blue car was seen rolling around the Burger King? Yeah, Gary. And when they go to talk to her, she was like, look, I can't tell you nothing about no murder. I don't know nothing about no murder. Yeah, Gary, my boyfriend, but a murder, I know nothing. Okay, but what I can tell you is that Gary did have my car on that night because Gary always getting mad and he always taking my car and he always don't bring it back for a couple of days. So I didn't think nothing of it when he took my car and just left. And girl, stand up. Why is that man always stealing your car? Why is that man always taking your car and not bringing it back for a couple of days? How do you get to work? That's your shit. Okay, anyway. And so now in hearing this, investigators is like, damn, What if the reason that Julie's description didn't match Gary is because it wasn't Gary driving Gary mama car? It was Steven driving Gary mama car, and somehow they both in on the murder for whatever reason. So with this new theory, they want to see if they can connect Gary and Steven in any way. And so they go into the system because, you know, they both are criminals. And they see that Gary and Steven were in fact both housed at the jail at the same time. And so it wouldn't be beyond the scope of imagination to think that they planned a robbery that ended up going wrong. And even though this theory seems like it's the most plausible, they really just don't have enough solid evidence to charge nobody with a crime. But then they get a call from a man named Anthony who is in jail. And Anthony said that he got information on the Burger King murders. And he basically tried to cut a deal to get out of jail in exchange for the information that he knows. And I don't know what kind of deal was cut for Anthony, but the information that they got was that on the morning of the murders, Anthony was out by the Burger King smoking pot. And he said that he seen Steven and Steven seen him. And him and Steven, they knew each other because Anthony used to buy from Steven. And so they chop it up for a little bit and then Steven walk off. And Anthony said that shortly after Steven walked off, he heard some gunshots. And when he looked in the direction of the gunshots, he saw Steven run out the back door of the Burger King. And so now they got somebody who put Steven at the scene of the crime. However, investigators is like, well, yeah, that's nice to know, but why didn't you come forward sooner? And Anthony was like, because I just told you. When I saw Steven, Steven saw me, and I didn't want no smoke. And even though the investigators believed Anthony, they just didn't feel like he would be considered a credible witness. It's not only because he was a criminal himself, but also because the only reason he came forward was to benefit himself. So they really just didn't feel like they had enough to where the DA would want to prosecute. And because of that, the murders ended up going unsolved for the next 6 years. And in that 6 years, Ronald Harnois, remember Tammy's husband who was in jail at the time when she was murdered? Yeah, he ended up going to trial for what he was in jail for. And now it's time to talk about what he was in jail for. So this goes way back to before Ronald even met Tammy. He had actually been married twice, and we don't really know too much about the first marriage. All we know is that within that first marriage, he and his wife had a daughter, and the marriage ended in divorce. Now, that second marriage, his wife's name was Joanne, and Ronald and Joanne were married in February of 1983. And the ins and outs of their marriage, we really don't know too much about, but what we do know is that roughly 6 years after they was married, in September of 1989, Joanne would end up meeting Tammy when she joined a bowling league that Ronald and Tammy were both a part of. And initially, Joanne and Tammy was cool with each other until Joanne had started feeling like Tammy and Ronald was fooling around with each other. And her suspicions would be verified because a couple of times she caught Tammy and Ronald together. And one of those times, they was in a car together in a parking lot at night, alone. And I don't know in what capacity the two of them were found together, like if they was booty button naked or if they was just talking. But however they was found, Ronald was able to convince Joanne that she didn't see what she saw and her eyes had deceived her because he and Tammy was just really good friends. But little did Joanne know that not only was her husband having an affair with Tammy, but her husband was Tammy's husband too, because months before Joanne had ever met Tammy, on March 26th of 1989, Tammy and Ronald got married. Tammy was 19 at the time, and Ronald was 39 years old. And seeing as how he was able to manipulate Tammy into marrying him while he was still married to Joanne, it should come as no surprise that he was also able to manipulate Tammy into plotting and planning the murder of Joanne. He was somehow able to convince Tammy that killing Joanne would be easier than getting a divorce for him, because he said that he had gone through a divorce before with his first wife. It was lengthy, it was costly, and he just wasn't gonna do that again. And so it would just be easier to kill his second wife so that him and Tammy could be married legally for real. And so he and Tammy had started plotting the murder of Joanne. So now it's August 1st, 1990. It's roughly 10:45 in the evening, and Joanne is riding down the street. And the reason that she's riding down the street is because she's on her way to pick up Ronald. Now, this is not something that she normally did, but a couple of weeks prior, Ronald's car had broken down. And this particular night, he told Joanne that him and Tammy was about to go to a mutual friend's house to look at maps. I really don't know what that means, But that's what he told Joanne, and he said that he was gonna need her to pick him up. And so, being the dutiful or doting wife that she was, she waited for Ronald to call her, and when he did, she went to go pick him up. And I don't know if I said it or not already, but she never picked him up from anywhere. Tammy always dropped him off after his car broke down. Anyway, she ran down the street to go pick up Ronald, and all of a sudden she hear a loud bang under her car. And the person who was driving behind her sees that her car is leaking gasoline. So they start waving their hands, screaming at her like, girl, get out your car, get out your car. So she pull over and get out the car. And her and the Good Samaritan, I'm just guessing that they used a payphone to call the police. So the police get there and they look at this car like, damn, what the hell happened? So they look up under the car and they like, oh, hell no. It's some pipe bombs under there. We need the ATF. So ATF get there, and what they discover is a partially exploded pipe bomb that didn't detonate properly. And they also find completely undetonated bombs, one of which was located directly under the driver's side of the car. And they looking at Joanne like, you is one lucky SOB, because the pipe bomb that partially exploded was able to cause enough damage to the car to the point where both back tires was blown out, the tailpipe was split in half and had hella holes in it, and the gas tank was destroyed. So had that bomb detonated completely, that one alone would have been enough to cause death or serious bodily injury to Joanne, let alone the one that was right underneath the driver's seat. So me and you know that Tammy and Ronald did this, but the ATF and the investigators don't know that just yet. And so they asked Joanne, is it okay if they search her house? And she gives them full consent, like, yeah, do what you gotta do, because I need to figure out what the hell is going on. And what they find is that all of the stuff that was used to create these pipe bombs was located in Ronald's tool chest. There was coils of wire, cutting tools, firework shells, pliers, wrenches, duct tape, the whole nine. He had it all, just sitting there, waiting to be found. And also, during the course of this attempted murder investigation, they had learned about Tammy and Ronald's marriage, their illegal marriage. And when they finally arrested Ronald, they charged him with attempted murder, possession of a bomb, conspiracy to commit murder, fourth-degree arson, and bigamy. And initially they had charged Tammy too, because they concluded that she was a co-conspirator in this attempted murder of Joanne. However, they ended up dropping her charge of conspiracy in exchange for her testimony against Ronald. And this attempted murder is what Ronald was in jail for when Tammy was killed, okay? I told y'all it was a lot. Now, even though Tammy was murdered in 1991, Ronald still went to trial in 1994. But in preparation for this trial, Tammy was supposed to be their star witness, but since she was no longer alive, she couldn't testify. And for whatever reason, they didn't allow the statement that she made to the grand jury to be presented at Ronald's trial. But baby, the way everybody else got on that stand and testified against Ronald's ass, they didn't even need Tammy's testimony. With all the evidence and witness testimony that they did have, Ronald ended up being convicted on 4 out of 5 counts. He was actually acquitted on the conspiracy charge, which I don't understand why, but nonetheless, he was convicted on 4 of those 5 counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And like I said, this trial happened for Joanne's attempted murder in 1994. So that was 4 years after Joanne's attempted murder and 3 years after Tammy and Jenner's murders. Right, so now Ronald is in jail for life for the attempted murder of his second wife, Joanne. But investigators are still trying to solve the murders of Tammy and Jenner. So it's 1997 now, and the case is still cold. But this is when a man comes into the police station with some letters. And he said that he had found these letters while he was moving out of his apartment. And the letters that he found belonged to his ex-girlfriend. And his ex-girlfriend was a woman named Celeste Harnois. And Celeste is the daughter of Ronald Harnois from his first marriage. Now, in reading these letters, investigators realized that these letters was written to Celeste from her father, Ronald, while he was in jail. And in these letters, Ronald is telling Celeste how he's found a way to keep Tammy from testifying against him. in Joanne's attempted murder case. And he pretty much said that he found somebody to hurt and or kill her. And this was the final piece of that puzzle that investigators needed to be able to charge somebody with the murders of Tammy and Jenner. And so they set out to find Gary Maxey and Stephen Wilson to see if they're ready to give it up. Because it's been a couple of years now. Maybe they're ready to talk. But what they find is that Stephen Wilson had actually passed away a couple of years ago due to a drug overdose. But Gary Maxey was still alive and well. And so they go scoop him up to press him about this. And they're like, listen, we got all the evidence we need to put you away for a very long time if you do not cooperate. And so Gary was like, you know what? I'm going to tell you what I know. And in exchange for probation, he pretty much gives it all up. And what he tells them is that one time while he was in jail, Ronald had approached him to get rid of Tammy. And Gary was like, listen, I steal and deal, I don't kill. That's just not my level of crime. I'm willing to do all of this stuff, but killing, that's where I draw the line, okay? And Ronald was like, okay, cool, fine. And so Ronald had ended up approaching Stephen, and Stephen agreed to do it, but Stephen said that he didn't really have the means to be able to carry this out. And so Ronald had asked Gary, like, okay, so look, I found somebody who is actually willing to take her out, but I'm gonna need your help. Is you able to help him in any type of way? And Gary's like, okay, cool, bet. I can get him a car, right? That's about all I can do. I can provide the cars. And so once Gary and Stephen got out of jail, Gary gave Stephen his girlfriend's car so that he could spy on Tammy. And then he gave Stephen his mama car to commit the murder. And that's why Julie was able to point out Gary's mama car, but she wasn't able to describe Gary as the driver because it wasn't Gary, it was Stephen. So the investigator's theory was right pretty much all along. So with all of the evidence gathered, in November of 2000, Ronald Harnois stood trial for the murders of Tammy and Jenner. And in conjunction with Gary's testimony at this trial, another inmate testified, and this inmate's name is William, and he said that he was the first person who Ronald tried to solicit to kill Tammy. And initially, William had agreed, and when William got out, Ronald had Celeste give him $2,500, and instead of committing the murder, William ran off with the money. He said that he never had any intentions of committing a murder. He just needed some money. And then another person who testified against Ronald in this trial was his daughter, Celeste. And so for the second time, everybody that Ronald had got involved with this plot to kill Tammy got on that stand and snitched on his ass. And because of that, he ended up being convicted of murder, conspiracy, and aiding and abetting, and he was sentenced to another life term in prison. Now, while we don't victim shame over here, we will give a good side eye to Tammy because girl, right? And then Jenner, he was so innocent in all of this. All he was trying to do was do his job. That's it. And he got wrapped up in this whole thing. But yeah, y'all, that is all I have for today's video. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. I feel like dancing. No, I'm just kidding. California knows how to party. California. I feel like that fall sign it's not doing what I needed to do. You know what? Honestly, I just need bookshelves. I really wish y'all could hear the stuff that be going on in my head. It's actually insane, but you know, whatever. Sometimes y'all get a little glimpse, but the full extent is crazy. If you've been rocking with me for a little minute now, then you already know that we are going from the, where we going? But being that he was a career, so they get Gary into it. Did I say she went to middle school with him or high school? She went to middle school with him. It doesn't matter. She went to school with me. And so with this new theory in mind, they go into the system and see that Gary and Stephen, and he and Joanne married in February of 1986. No, 3. 6 years later, in September of 1989, she couldn't testify, and they didn't, and it wasn't, and her, and so once